Hey everybody, Kevin here again with another episode for you of the Real Estate Without Renters podcast. Thank you as always for listening to the show. And thanks for those 5-star ratings. I just looked at the podcast the other day and I've got all 5-star ratings and that is awesome. So if you enjoy the show, please give me a nice 5-star rating. That does help. I can attract more guests, put on more podcasts, and I do appreciate that. Also, please, thank you for sharing the show. If you're a part of a meetup group, real estate investment club, anything like that, please recommend the show and we can start to grow this. And once again, bring on great guests for you like we have today and be able to produce more of these podcasts as well. So I've got a special guest I haven't seen in quite some time. We've communicated by email lately over the years, but somebody that I got to know very well because when I was doing 3-day trainings, Mark came out to quite a few of them. And we used to take random deals and I would just go through a tape and start looking at deals, and inevitably we'd find something that looked pretty good. And Mark and his partner would end up buying some of those, which they still have today. They've resold those. So it's nice to see all these notes go through the full range of motion here. And also when I started dedicating myself to doing the personal mentorships, which is a service that I offer, working with people one-on-one through Zoom, through every phase of this business. It took me several years to get to that point, and I started by producing a book. And one of the people I reached out to is our guest, Mark Bruce, who was kind enough to contribute 2 chapters in that book, along with a couple of other people. And that was really helpful in the beginning to get the word out and let people know what I was doing and what my mission was for the industry. So welcome, Mark Bruce. How are you?
Great to be here, Kevin. Great
Yeah,
to be here.
it's so good to see you, and I mean that. I know when you knew me in my past with other companies that I was working with, and then going out on my own and making that decision. I really had some goals in mind, and I appreciate you guys jumping on in the book for me and help me put that together.
Hey, we appreciate being part of your book. You taught us more about notes than I think anybody else that we've worked with, and you are a great teacher.
Well, thank you.
I,
I
I,
appreciate that. Appreciate
I
that
mean,
very
my
much.
dad my dad was a teacher, but and so I come from a teaching family. You were a great teacher. I appreciate it.
Thanks. That's interesting because my grandmother was a school teacher. My younger sister's a school teacher. Her husband's a school teacher, and I guess in a way I'm a teacher as well, huh? But I like it. I enjoy it. I like seeing the results, that people get, and it's just fun for me. And again, I think that comes through. And you've been to so many of my trainings. I remember, I'm sure I came up to you because I did it with other people that kept coming back all the time too, going, gee, you got to get bored at some of this stuff, right? Because you're just hearing it over and over again. But you were always gracious with that.
Every time we come back, you know, we learn more. So something that you said, actually the fifth time we heard, is like, oh my gosh, that's what he means. I mean, that learning the note business for us was kind of like drinking out of a fire hose. I'd been a real estate investor,
Yeah,
but the note side of thing, I mean, learning the paperwork and all that stuff, it was like learning a completely new foreign language
yeah.
in the beginning.
Right. And with your entrepreneurial background, and then getting into notes, I thought my listeners would be very interested in that because you were able to build up a pretty impressive portfolio in a fairly short period of time, quite frankly. And part of this is investment, part of this is business. So you certainly have to have that entrepreneurial spirit. So can you tell us a little bit about that journing?
Starting where do you want me to start?
Well,
Because it's
you
a
you
long.
were in an unrelated business to real estate, and then something you were probably getting into real estate. I'm not sure on the investment side, and then you saw notes. But
Okay.
starting in that, where did it come from? How much of this is entrepreneurial spirit and that pursuit, and what attributes, I guess, is what I'm saying, do you need to be successful in this business to build up a portfolio?
I am a serial entrepreneur. In 1985, my wife and I opened a business, a retail business, and we grew it to a chain that we ended up being bought out by a franchise. Um, when we were bought out, our plan was to buy 100 rental properties in Baltimore City because the cash flow in Baltimore City was fantastic. We bought 6 houses the first year, and the first one was terrifying.
Yeah,
As you know, the first time you do anything, it's terrifying.
yeah,
but we bought 6. We hired 3 different property management companies to see who was going to be the best. We never bought another property, and we tried 3 more property management companies, and then realized real estate with renters was not what we thought it was. We kept them for a while, and I've always been part of a mastermind group, and I mastermind with my current partner in Equity First Funding, Deborah Clement,
Mhm.
and she was looking at she was the #1 money mailer franchisee in the United States, living in Orange County, California, and she had just sold her business and was thinking about opening a property management company. And I was like, Deborah, whatever you do, don't open a property management company. Your tenants will hate you. Your landlords will hate you. You won't make any money.
Yeah.
So we started researching, and that's when we found, your training
Mm.
and the training that you were working with then.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize what a big deal it was, but I got her to fly from Laguna Beach, California to Columbus, Ohio in December. And she didn't have a coat because she lived in Southern California. She didn't need a coat. I did not realize how much she hated cold weather.
Yeah.
But we joined your training, and then, like I said, we bought our first note shortly thereafter, and it was terrifying the first time we did it. It's like, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, there's all this stuff, and but you made it easy. You were always there if we needed to ask a question, and the community that we were part of at the time always answered. You could network with people that had other experiences, and I find networking with people is really important.
Yeah, I agree. In fact, I was just yesterday at a conference for seventh annual non-performing loan conference held by IMN. And I don't know if you've been to that one or
I
not,
have
that
not.
conference.
No.
Yeah. It's really not so much for the individual investor as it is for the folks who own the private equity firms. So there was a lot of those people there, and more individual investors should probably attend that, because those are the people that you want to meet. They're the ones who are buying in large packages and then divvying those up into bite-sized pieces, so to speak, for the small investors. And yeah, the networking. At this conference, I was speaking on a panel. Now, we actually had a good presence in the room during our panel, but a lot of them, some of the panels were not well attended because everybody's out in the hall networking. It's one of those events where just everybody's just wanting to meet and exchange cards and things like that. So it's definitely a part of the business. And what was your goal, being business oriented and owning a business and being able to sell a business like that? My thought would be that you have plans in mind. So when you and your partner decided, hey, we're going to get into this note business, what was did you set a specific early plan, or was it long term? Was it a combination of both, or what was your approach from a planning standpoint?
Our long-term plan, we'd both sold businesses. Our long-term plan was to try and replace our past income with passive income
Mm-hmm.
through notes. And yeah, in the beginning, it was a little slower than we would have liked, buying 1 or 2 notes at a time every couple of months. And
Right.
we did it. We did eventually find some sources where we could buy multiple notes and bigger packages. And it was probably good that we went through the learning curve. If we'd have done what we wanted to do in the beginning, we probably would have. Matter of fact, I know somebody who did, and I think he pulled most of his hair out just because it was too overwhelming to learn
Yeah.
the paperwork. And our model was to only buy performing loans because we wanted cash flow. So we really didn't want to deal with non-performing loans too much. And yet, when you buy performing loans, you occasionally get to learn how to deal with non-performing loans. So
Yeah, and you were in a different market. I'm so bad with dates and time frames. My wife's excellent on that, so I guess I've become dependent upon her for those dates and times. But I know during that period, at least, and you probably know the dates, but the inventory was quite different than it is today. In fact, I just got a report, PaperStack. You're familiar with PaperStack. It's a
yep.
trading platform, and I've talked about it on this podcast before. And I train the owners in the business as well. And their office is now like 4 miles down the road, and I have lunch with them from time to time. And they have a lot of activity on their website, and they come out with an annual report, and it breaks down what percentage of notes that were bought on their platform were performing? How many were non-performing? What was the price range? What was the ITVs? And I find it pretty fascinating because I believe it's truly a good statistical sample of what's going on in the tire industry. And I was a little surprised because I was thinking right now, just based upon my daily activity and working with all of my clients, is there's probably 70-80% performing notes, 30% non-performing notes in the inventory pools right now. At the conference this weekend, a lot of those people were complaining about inventory, and it was purpose built for non-performing loans. And the report that I looked at, and I just had time to look at it this morning, 90% of the loans that were traded through PaperStack were performing, and only 10% were non-performing. That was certainly not the case when you're talking about. So you were pursuing performing loans, but in a world that all of a sudden we had that real estate crash in 2008, 9, and 10, and there was a heck of a lot more non-performing loans, right?
Yes, we started in 2016, January of 2016, and there were a lot of non-performing loans, and you could buy them pretty inexpensively. I'd done some rehabbing in the past, and I couldn't wrap my hands around not being able to see the inside of a house to know what you were going to have to deal with. I kept waiting for Google to come out with that app you showed.
That was a good bit. What he's talking about, that was a good bit. It happened spontaneous one time, and after that it was a part of the show, if you will. Yeah, I used to show people at a live training, just so you know what we're laughing about here. At the live trainings, I would of course, be working on my computer, and we would look at deals, and I would go online and look at public records. And of course, as a part of your research, you look at the property, so you get on Google Maps and you kind of look at it. And I would tease everybody and just say, now, what a lot of people don't know is down on the bottom right-hand corner, it might be too small for you guys to see on the screen, so I'm baiting the audience into this, and I'm going, you're able to actually see inside the house. And people are like, ha, 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 no, no, no. And I'm like, oh, yeah, you go right here. First of all, you have to zoom all the way in. Then you have to click right on this button. And I would inevitably wait. There you go. I'd wait for that audience to lean in. And because they're going, no, no, no. And all of a sudden, it's like, I don't stop. I keep going. And they go, what? And then, yeah, well, then I got then I go, nah, you can't.
That was fun.
That was a good bit. I haven't done that in years. But yeah. And well, that tells everybody he's been to my training a lot more than one time to remember those little things. And of course, you were in on the joke, because you had already seen it before.
Not the first time. I was like, you gotta be kidding me.
Yeah, it is a little weird though, to get back to your point, to buy, the thought process, especially with real estate investors and folks like that with rehab experience, as you were saying, there are certain skills that are transferable from real estate, no question about it. But there's also, some blinders that you can put on with some experience in that, and it doesn't translate over to the new into the note business. And I've got to reprogram some people versus people that come in with a clean slate. But yeah, it is a little bit for people to go, don't really know what the inside looks like, and you take a educated risk on that sort of thing. But as you know, back then, especially because the inventory was shifted from what it is today, a lot more non-performing notes. Those are selling so cheap, where it's like, okay, it's a 1,000 square foot home. What 800 square foot home? What would it possibly cost me, to redo that? So it got a little easier for those reasons. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you built up. So you started pursuing. It started slow. Just to recapture where we were, you started buy one or two, and then blessing in disguise, now you're able to start to buy in bigger packages. And you got to a point that I'll kind of skip ahead, where you wanted to change up your portfolio. And it's important in a market like this to have the liquidity. And 20, 30 years ago, we didn't have as much liquidity. Today, even more liquidity than what you had. And what I mean by that is sometimes, things in life change. And I think you found some different pursuits, and you had a nice portfolio of notes, but it's like, do we go into debt for this other business opportunity, or do we liquidate some of our assets? And a lot of my clients, of course, scoop those up. But what was the thought process behind that move?
Well, we had a really good source for notes for a while, and as you said, things changed, and we needed to make a shift from what we were doing.
Yeah.
We did sell. We didn't intend to sell all our notes, but they were on our website, and I think all but one got bought.
Yeah.
The one that's on there, it's a decent note, but the person that's living in the house was self-employed with a credit score of 450, who put a whole $1,000 down on a $54,000 house in a neighborhood where they probably sold for 50,000.
Yeah.
Now, I sold her the house. I knew her background story. She had a compelling story, and she's made all her payments on time. She even made it through 2020. But
Yeah.
So we shifted. We were looking to get a little more passive so we could do some other things. And I when we did that, we sold most of those notes. We're now lending, doing some hard money lending and buying some hard money lending notes from people. But that was our thought process. It was kind of 2020 when everybody, something happened. I forget exactly what it was, but everybody started having a lot of time because there wasn't as much to do. I can't remember what happened early 2020.
Yeah.
But I don't think we're allowed to say, actually. But I decided to get back into a book that I read in college, which I keep with me all the time, Think and Grow Rich.
Yeah.
And that led me to Bob Proctor, who studied this book. He studied the book from 1961 until the day he died in 2022. And he created some really good training programs, and I went through them, and then I said, this is interesting. I kind of got recruited to coach and teach people through it, and it's a lot. It's basically on mindset,
Yeah.
which it's the mindset that helped me buy my first rental property when I was scared to death. It was the mindset that helped us buy our first note when we was like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? What if they stop paying?
Yeah.
So learning how to do that, and I find that other people need to know how to do that as well. So
Yeah, I would hope that all of my listeners, you've read Think and Grow Rich. If you haven't, you need to. It's an absolute classic. I read it early on, high school, college, by college, certainly for sure. Mine's all yellowed pages and highlighted and all those sorts of things. And yeah, it's a great one. And it does stimulate, the thought process. And part of the note business, I mean, you go back and look at it, and we've kind of touched around it, but to put a pin on it, it's solving problems is what we do. Whether it's a performing note or non-performing note, it's still, or creating a note. You're providing loans. That's in the note business as well. And you identify and think through it and say, well, here's a problem. Let's identify it. Let's come up with a solution, and that's where the money's made, right?
Yep. Yep. I mean, it teaches. I mean, Napoleon Hill wrote it. It took him 20 years to write it. He interviewed 500 of the wealthiest men in the world at the time, and he wrote it he kind of started a little bit before the Great Depression and carried it all the way through.
Yeah, Carnegie and
It's
Mellon,
got
and yeah, I mean, just yeah,
it's got great lessons.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, timeless.
Some
Yeah.
some of the things the course and the book teacher, we can all hear, see, smell, taste, and touch. We've got 5 senses, but there are six mental faculties that are stronger than those, which are perception, the will, imagination, memory, reason, and intuition. And if you can put those thinking skills together, we used the will. We decided, okay, we are going to buy a note. So we focused on it. This is what we're going to do with our business. And as you said, perception. Somebody can see. I was so lucky to have a partner, because you could take a look at one note, and I might see it this way, but she could see it from another point of view, and then to bring it to you and let you look at it with all your experience, you can get an even better perspective on how to do it.
Right. So will, perspective, and what were the others?
Imagination. I mean, the note business takes a lot of imagination.
Yeah.
Memory, reason. Memory is obvious, but reason, where you have the ability to think and say, okay, this person is doing this. Or this is the situation. How can I use that to the best benefit for everybody? And then intuition. People people say when you pray, you're talking to God. When God's talking to you, that's your intuition.
Hmm.
So you just, it's your gut feeling. You kind of just know. You can't see. Google doesn't have that app where you can see in the house. You just know that this house is in this neighborhood, and I can't lose at this price.
Yeah.
So you can pull the trigger.
Yeah, that's interesting because, as you know, I've always said to really master this business, you've got to know the numbers and the story, and I've
Yeah.
always said that and always felt that was true. And as you were explaining those concepts there, part of what those things are is the story. For example, when we're looking at notes, what's the payment history? That's not going to magically change when you buy it. It's going to be, well, that's their payment history. It's likely to continue in that fashion. So if they're on a rolling 30-day or rolling 60-day, meaning everybody, if they're just constantly 30 days late, or you got a note where they miss a month and they catch up, that's what it's going to be. One of the ones that really stands out in my memory, to put a point on that one, there was a guy it was either Wisconsin or Michigan, but up in that area of the country. And I went back and looked at his payment history for like 3 years. And during 3 of the winter months, he never made a payment. But it was consistent over 3 years. I'm going, what the heck is going on in the winter? And I got some pictures of the property. It was summertime, and you could clearly see the guy was in the lawn care business. I'm like, okay, let me put this puzzle together here. He's got the truck, he's got the logo, he's got the lawn equipment, and he takes the winter off. He doesn't go into the snowplow business, during the winter. He just, says, nope, done for the year. And sure enough, that note continued on that specific pattern. So then you look at the, do you have the investor tolerance for that? Looking at the house and going, well, they're maintaining the outside of this house. They haven't made a mortgage payment. And I mean, back then it was like, they haven't made a mortgage payment in 4 or 5 years, but hedges are trimmed. Grass is cut. It's well maintained. And that kind of translates on intuition. It's like, well, if they're taking care of it, number one, the inside probably is reflected by the outside. Number two, they're showing an indicator that they want to stay. They want to do some kind of a loan modification. They ran into a rough patch. And then you look at public records and see, oh, they're paying their property taxes, even though they haven't paid on their mortgage. They want to stay. So you get these indicators, and that's where the entrepreneurial mindset, I think, that comes through in all of that is,
that's when you use your intuition. That's when you use your
here's my
intuition
exit
and your
strategy.
reasoning.
Here's what I'm going to approach, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, very interesting. Very interesting on that. I bet you love teaching that philosophy.
Oh,
It's just,
I do. I mean, I love helping people. I've had businesses since I was 25 years old, and I learned a lot. And some of it was not learned easily, but it was everything. I learned things back then that helped me in the note business, which is, it's fantastic.
yeah. Well, I think those things help in life. I'll have to talk to you offline about that, because I'm really intrigued by that, because I've read it, but again, it's one of those things you read it back on the shelf, and I think you got to refresh it. But that's the great thing about teaching. When you're working with entrepreneurs who are working with you to develop this mindset, it's got to be repeated. It's got to be over. So as a teacher, man, you're repeating it all the time. It's just reinforcing for yourself too.
Yeah, well, the book says to read the book 3 times and then go back to chapter 2 and do each chapter as the chapter says to do. And I didn't remember that from reading it in college the first time. I
don't remember that either.
I just didn't. And then so I was doing that in 2020. I was walking, listening to listening to it on the audiobook. I listened to it 3 times, and then I ran into Bob Proctor. It's like, wait a minute, this guy studied this thing for 50 some years. I think I'm gonna, use some of the experience that he has as my mentor and let him fast track me, just like, anybody that wants to learn the note business should partner with you so that you can teach them how to. I mean, had we not gone through your trainings, we probably would have never bought a note, even though we'd have learned everybody needs a mentor.
Yeah, there's a little minefield out there, in it, and that's the thing. And there's some people that they try it on their own, they get into one bad deal, and that was their note experience, and they're done with it. And I see things, just all the time. And as you said, perspective is different. I great case study the other day. We had a note that was promoted in first position. And my client, who's now been working with me, so he doesn't need me for the day-to-day running the math sort of thing. So he sees this note, he runs his numbers, he makes an offer of 52,000 bucks on a first position performing loan. And then he schedules an appointment with me one-on-one, back to the mentor aspect of it. And I started going through, I'm going, hang on a second, there's a loan here, another mortgage from 1996, and there's no satisfaction. Said, so either a satisfaction hasn't been filed, maybe it's there, but it hasn't been filed. Okay. So find out. And he asked, and they didn't have no satisfaction. I said, well, this is a second mortgage. This is not a first mortgage here. And oh, I'm sorry, it's a non-performing note. My apologies. It was a non-performing note. We knew that, but again, it wasn't in first position. It's a non-performing note in second position, which, as you know, is a completely different story. And that completely changed the deal. Now the sellers were shocked, that it was the second that we pointed out to them and proved it to them. And so that changed the offer down to 17,000, just like that. He would have made a huge mistake in investing at that price. And at 17,000, he was still looking to walk away. But I looked at the first, I go, this is 1996. And on their credit report, it shows a balance of $12,000. When I run the amortization, guess what? It's about 12,000 bucks. So you can foreclose from second position and pay off the first. And I said, in this case, it's a $150,000 house. You've got a note with a $92,000 legal balance you're getting for $17,000 if you need to foreclose from. So it just completely changed the thing of it, where he would have either made a mistake in buying it or would have passed on the deal. So it is things like that, and part of it is just experience. There's no replacing that. And I think that's where the mentorship comes in. What does Think and Grow Rich say about mentorship and such? I mean,
it's got a whole chapter. And Napoleon Hill, actually Napoleon Hill, he had a mastermind. But he had mentors. I mean, Andrew Carnegie was his mentor, and as he wrote the book, Henry Ford, he utilized everything that he learned from them as them teaching him, and then he incorporated it into the book. He also said a mastermind is a great way to get different perspectives, and have a group that you can go to and kind of have as mentors.
Yeah. And the concept of mastermind you mentioned too, I think has been, it's been modified over time to the original definition. I have a little book I usually keep in my briefcase over there, but I cleaned that out last night. I think it's in my closet. But he says with the mastermind, it's two or more people. It doesn't have to be a whole group. It's two or more people with a common focus on a united goal. I'm not quoting that exactly correct, but it's really, that's what it is, And today, a lot of people are looking at masterminds, and you got a room full of 20, 30 people that, might get 10 minutes about them, and everybody, I think that's changed from the original definition of what Napoleon Hill saw it was, because they're not focused on the first chapter's on focus, right? So it's focused on a common goal. And I think that's what people need to realize when it comes to masterminds. It's two people.
You can get something out of large masterminds like that, but it's
group thing. There's some value.
The mastermind that Think and Grow Rich and Bob Proctor talk about, they recommend kind of capping it at 8, so that everybody can, everybody knows what I'm looking for, and I know what they're looking for, and we can help each other. And you go to the mastermind not so much for what you can get, but what you can bring to the mastermind and help other people, because the more you help other people,
law of attraction comes back.
The more you'll be helped.
Yeah, awesome. Jumping forward, I know you're looking at land notes, and land notes is definitely, it's very interesting to me to see how inventory shifts. I mean, we're looking at some new notes that you probably aren't even familiar with, but there's a lot of HECMs, home equity conversion mortgages, which are the FHA guaranteed reverse mortgage. And as our population shifts and gets older, it's just natural, the baby boomer generation, there's going to be a percentage that are going to get reverse mortgages because there's a ton of equity in the house. And why not? They can be good programs for certain people in certain situations, right? They kind of have a bad reputation in some circles, but done properly, they can be very beneficial to someone. And a lot of those notes now are hitting the market and being sold, and different workouts with those. We're seeing rehabbers starting to run into problems because inflation, lumber's up. I mean, everything that you utilize to renovate a house, it's more expensive. And rehabbers who got in, they borrowed high interest rate money, and now it's costing them more in time and money to fix it up, are starting to go, you know what? At the end of the day, who am I going to sell this to? How are they going to get bank financing to qualify this? I'm out. And they're walking away from these short-term loans, and the short-term loan lenders, which I know you do some of that, you know, you don't want that property back and half a rehab, you know, it's like, now I'm in the rehab business again. You want to sell that note. So we're starting to see some of those come into play as well. But land notes for sure have arrived. And I know you got into that, and I've done some, at least tip of the days on that. And I think I produced a video or something on it, but because it's that much on the radar screen. And you got involved in that. What attracted you to doing those?
Well, one of the things attractive is you don't have to worry about the
The
shape
structure,
that the
yeah.
house is in.
What the condition is inside, yeah. Yeah,
And you can see if it's in wetlands or if it's got floodplain, or you can see all that before you buy it.
yeah,
Most of them are 5 to 10 year notes, so they're not super long term. And you can pick. I mean, we picked up land notes that had unpaid balances as small as $12,000 on up to 150.
yeah.
So it's kind of they're affordable, and the returns. The people that are selling property with owner financing, there are a fair number of people out there that are selling it that we can buy from at pretty good yields. So
Yeah, yeah. Well, I got a tip for you. I'm myself looking at a land deal right now, and because a lot of these investors are buying the land inexpensively, right? And then they're basically selling it on terms. So the
yeah,
price is higher. It's hard to lock in what is a lot worth unless it's in an area where a number of lots are being sold. But if it's out in the country, single lot, it's hard to really get a true value on something like that. It's a little more speculative. So sometimes they buy it so inexpensively and sell it at a higher price, create a note, and the person's making payments. No problem with that. I've got one right now I'm looking at where it's $50,000, or around the numbers. $50,000 is what the guy paid for the land. I saw a survey where it's already being platted out, where they're going to put homes. So good future planning's like good, higher and best use. He put $20,000 down, and they have a $30,000 note. Now, by searching public records, I found out how much she paid for the land, which I won't go into here, but it was inexpensive, but it was a good find. It was a good buy.
yep.
Neighborhoods around it, everything else. So I was comfortable with that valuation of 50,000, which is what he paid. Comparable sales say it's worth 70, but it just sold a couple months ago, so it's worth 50. That's what the guy paid, in my opinion. So in approaching that, I know I ran the numbers at buying the whole note at a good yield, but the note has zero seasoning. Now he's got $20,000 down, which
Right.
balances out a little bit, but no seasoning, which means, of course, payment history. So my approach was a concept, now you might remember, called multi-stage buyout.
Okay.
So
I
instead of discounting the note, so 30,000, she wants par for the note because she wrote the note at 12%, I think, either 10 or 12, doesn't matter. She wrote the note for that. She wants to sell the note for par, the full unpaid balance. So I could counter and say, I'll give you 26,000 and count my discount, but here's what I'm offering. I'll give you 30,000 for the note, which I don't think anybody else is going to do, but I'll pay you $15,000 now. And then in 5 years, I'll pay you the other 15,000. And what that does is lower my overall cost of getting in. My yield, if I discount it, might be 12% I'm making. When you run the numbers on a financial calculator, now it's 20% I'm making.
Right.
And then I either
like
set it
buying,
up where I have the obligation to buy the back end, or I have the right to buy the back end. So that could be determined, and I'll make another 20% per year on that 5 years.
It's kind of like buying partials instead of selling partials.
Yeah, I'm basically, when you run the numbers, it's a 120-year note. So I'm saying I'll buy half of it now for half the money.
Yep.
That's pretty fair.
Great
So multi-stage
idea.
buyout, and my yield goes,
See, Kevin, you're always teaching me something new. This is great.
so my yield goes up and my risk is down because I'm only in it for 15 grand now. So
yeah.
But I like land notes. There are some pitfalls, that you mentioned a couple of wetlands and oh boy, avoid, of course, environmental issues, those sorts of things, and just think if there's a higher and best use. But you're right. It takes out the house problem or the improvement, let's say, problem. As long as the land has a higher best use and you're okay taking it back. That's the thing. I had another guy buy something way up in New England, and at the end of the day, he goes, "Hey, if they default, I'd love to have that land." Well, that's all you need then. You don't
Right.
you don't have
Exactly.
to. We don't have to go into further on that. So, is your plan on that to build a portfolio or just to?
Yep. That's what we like to do. We like to build a portfolio of that. You do have to be careful, like you say, because there are sections. We've been buying some in Florida, and there's sections on the west coast of the down south in like Fort Myers where they have this little bird called a scrub jay.
Oh yeah.
And if a scrub jay builds a nest on a lot, it's no longer buildable.
Yep.
So you got to learn the markets that you're buying in for sure.
Yep. And there's a turtle thing too. Forget the name of the turtle that if they find those on there, you can't develop. You can't do anything. Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good point on that. Well, excellent. So mindset important for all of the above, and being able to think through these things, and again, think and grow rich. And whatever these notes have in common, it does come down to what's the collateral, what am I investing, and what's my return. It's
the six criteria that make a note that you value a note on.
Yeah.
We don't have to worry about the condition of the house, but you should consider the condition of the land.
Yeah.
And it's the borrower. If they put a big down payment down with land, it's not as big a deal, but it's the borrower, it's the paperwork, it's the terms, it's the six pillars you have to worry about. And it carries over pretty easy.
Are you looking at flipping over to being the one who buys the land and then creates the note?
We have tried some of that, and we're doing a little bit of that.
Yeah, a little more work to find them and research them versus just buy a note that somebody else already created. Yeah,
I'm spending a lot more of my time coaching on mindset these days. Yeah. So I have, but we have bought a buyer in house. So we have somebody who's making calls for us, trying to buy property for us. So.
Yeah, awesome. Very good. Well,
crossed.
Time has flown by here on this one. So once again, Mark Bruce is who we've been talking to. Do you have a website if anybody's interested in learning from you on the mindset?
Sure. On the mindset coaching, it's www.markwbruce.com.
Okay. And we'll post that on the website as well. And I can tell you, I've known Bruce for, well, you said the date there, so I can't believe it's only 8 years. I would have thought it was longer than that, but
well, we go back and forth, with our Wofford Furman debate. So it does seem like we go back.
Southern Conference rivalry, everybody, if you don't know the colleges there, but yeah, exactly. Very good. So check them out, everybody. I'm telling you, the mindset is an important part, and Think and Grow Rich has definitely been a book that I've had to go through myself, and I think it's good for everybody in every aspect. So if you're looking for help in that area, Mark is your guy. So thanks again for being on. Do appreciate you. And again, it was good to see you again.
Always great seeing you, Kevin. Thank you so much. Appreciate you having me.
You bet. Thanks, everybody. Look forward to putting another show together for you real soon.